Hello, I'm Julie Smith. I think, assuming we're quorate to recreate the Appg on citizens' rights, going to be one of the vice chairs, because members of the House of Lords are not eligible to be the chair of an all-party parliamentary group. That has to be done by an MP. But I'm delighted to welcome you here this afternoon, because clearly for EU citizens and EU students, December 2020 is potentially a very difficult time, and we very much want to hear your insights. And the plan is to record this session, and that can be then shared with other members of the all-party parliamentary group. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. And Hilary, would you like to start? I assume you've got a few words to comment.
I do. Thank you so much for having us all here. It's really important that we are speaking about this, especially as the time is so tight. So by way of opening remarks, I think the first thing that I really need to say is that the actions of the current government are quite simply not creating an environment that is welcoming to international students, and even more simply does not make logical sense. There are thousands of students from the European Union who have started courses at UK universities and colleges this year, but have not been able to travel to the UK yet, either because of travel restrictions or personal reasons caused by COVID-19. These are students who started courses this year in the knowledge that it would allow them to have home fee status, access to student loans, and most importantly, visa-free travel to the UK. Yet, because of circumstances completely outside of their control, this last one is under threat. We know that freedom of movement is coming to an end on the 1st of January, and we have repeatedly been told this, but not to have made any exceptions or adaptations to this during a global pandemic is quite frankly reckless. And it's not just numbers on a page, but this is actual students, actual human beings who have dreamed of coming to the UK to study and now may no longer be able to. When we have spoken to government ministers on this issue, one of the responses has always been that they do not feel that students should be treated differently in these circumstances. But the fact is that students are already being treated differently, as at a time when the whole of the UK is under some form of COVID restrictions and the government is warning against all but essential international travel, they are telling students that they must get to the UK before January the 1st to avoid having to apply for a visa under the new student route. I really find this astonishing that they are not making any exceptions, and as such are potentially risking further transmission of the virus and putting student lives at risk. This is a clear contradiction of messages. For those students that do not make this deadline, the impact will be immense. They will now need to apply for visas under the student route at a significant cost of around £1,000 that they will not have budgeted for. They will have to provide evidence to demonstrate they meet the conditions of these visas, including financial requirements and paying the ever-growing NHS health surcharge. And even after that, there is no guarantee that they'll get their visas in time to start their courses next term. Plus, while they will be eligible for the new graduate route, they will not be guaranteed to be able to stay in the UK long-term as settled status or pre-settled status allows. This issue is causing huge amounts of stress for many students. We have been contacted by so many students who have said that the whole situation makes them feel as though they are no longer welcome here. This is even the case for those who have got settled status, as they have no physical proof of their status and have to manually log on to an online system every time they need to prove it. Another major issue is a lack of understanding about this issue, and this stems from poor communications from the government. The Home Office have recently launched a comms campaign on this, but quite frankly, this is too little too late and has allowed a lot of misinformation to spread. We have heard from students who thought that they still had to apply for the new student route, even though they had pre-settled status, and students who thought they did not need to apply for the scheme because their parents have. We have been working with the delegation of the European Union to the United Kingdom to spread correct information to our members on this issue as a national union. At NUS, we have been calling for an extension to the eligibility criteria for the EU settlement scheme until the end of this academic year or the end of travel restrictions, to allow all students who have enrolled on courses at UK universities this year to access it. This is a common sense solution to a problem that has been exacerbated by this pandemic. Yet, after raising this numerous times with government ministers, they have shown no willingness to budge. And so this is why us three are here today to really speak to you about it. And I think it's even more imperative going into the new term, because the government have put in new guidance on when students should come back, because the government have been, you know, putting out all sorts of information that has not highlighted the impact it's going to have on those students coming. So thank you for letting me make those opening remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. Some of the issues we have tried in the House of Lords repeatedly to raise with the government. Some of them I wasn't aware of. So I think I've got a few questions, and I'd like to welcome Harry Anderson, who's just appeared. Harry, just to say that I'm chairing this meeting, Roger Casali has asked me to chair it, but it's being recorded so that New Europeans, or as a secretariat, can send it to anybody linked to the APPG. So Hillary's obviously just given some opening thoughts from the NUS perspective. I'll move to Tiana and Jack to see if they would like to add, and then come over to you if that's acceptable. Yeah. Tiana, would you like to come in at this stage?
Well, so Hillary's done a really great job of outlining the issue. It's pretty much the same situation with us at Queen Mary, which is why we brought the issue to NUS in the first place, because we realised that, you know, this isn't just something that's affecting international students at our university, but actually across the country. It's a much wider problem. So from Jack and I's perspective, we've had a lot of students coming to our advice and counselling services, just asking for support because they were just didn't know what was going on, how things were going to affect them, how to deal with the changes, and how that would affect their status as their visa status, but also their status in the university, because if they don't have the requirements to be in the country, they don't have the requirements to study at the university. So like, it has a knock-on effect on their lives in general. I don't have like Hillary's done a great job of outlining the problem, but yeah, just wanting to echo that and say, yeah, all the feedback that we've been getting from international students is mostly just kind of, there's just been a lack of communication, a lack of information, and a lack of, I guess, understanding of their situation, and kind of been left to the sidelines and forgotten about. And Hillary mentioned that, you know, students, maybe it's been said that students shouldn't be treated differently, but the reality is that they have a different circumstance to other people that should be taken into account. So I think that's what we wanted to raise here today.
Thank you. I mean, I'm trying very hard, chairing the meeting, to be as objective and non-partisan as possible, because all party parliamentary groups, a bit like parliamentary committees, are not usually party political, but obviously there are a whole range of issues that you're talking about that clearly can and should be raised with the government. So at the end, I'll try and sum up a few of the issues and see if there are ways of raising them, because I think what both Hillary and Tiana have already picked up on are mixed messages coming from the Home Office, from the Department of Health, and then also from education. And my day job is as a university academic, hence the bookshelves behind me. And I'm sure Harry is going to say, from a UK perspective, the guidance that comes from the government doesn't always seem to be entirely joined up. But Jack, would you like to come in at this stage?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said before. You know, Hillary and Tiana again have done a fantastic job of outlining the issues. I think the thing that strikes me the most with all of this is the human cost of all of this, and it's really important, and I'm sure, you know, everyone here will agree, it's really important to remember the fact that these students are, you know, part of our own community, and they're people, and, you know, they have lives here. Say some students affected by this had already been living in the UK for some time, and then will have returned to their home country because of the pandemic, and then now they find themselves in an awful situation where they can't, or they're being forced to return to somewhere they might think of as home, and if they don't, then that home is kind of being taken away from them or made more difficult for them to feel a part of. And some of the stories that we've heard are just really heartbreaking. It's just a really unfortunate situation that unfortunately, you know, we can't necessarily control because of the pandemic, but there's definitely things that the government can do to make things easier for these students. And I think the morally right thing to do would be for these changes to be made. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll get the changes that we need.
Thank you. So Harry, what Hilary was talking about initially was obviously the issues of visas, but also the fact that there are EU students who might have expected to start a course in October who haven't yet been able to arrive and therefore are facing potentially a different regime when they finally arrive in January, or indeed are being encouraged to arrive before the 31st of December, even when other government advice is that people shouldn't be travelling. So the mixed messages seem to be, I think, that a problem. But then beyond the mixed messages, there are issues which we've seen for a long time between the Home Office, which has one view of students, and education and business, innovation and skills, who maybe have a different view. So Harry, can I come to you and ask for your perspective, please?
Oh yes, thanks very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name's Harry Anderson. I'm a policy manager at Universities UK, and I cover off the immigration brief. And so I think I'm sort of very thankful to sort of join you today and have the opportunity. I have got a few slides, but I'm not sure if we can share the screen or not.
Yes, I can do that, Harry. Yeah, hold on. I'm making you the co-host.
Thank you very much.
So you just need to say yes to that, and then you should be fine.
Okay. I'm not sure if it is.
Oh, sorry. I think I hold on.
If it's
Here. Yep.
Oh, there we are. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay.
Hilary's smiling because I made her co-host by mistake, but she could be her co-host too.
well, hopefully you can. I'm not sure if that's popped up.
That looks great.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, so as mentioned, I'm a policy manager at Universities UK, covering off immigration. So I suppose I'm just sort of keen, you know, probably just to speak for about 5 minutes on I think specifically the issue, you know, just raised, and from what it sounds like that Hilary and the NUS talked about with regards to EU nationals who have pre-settled status, and obviously some of the challenges around there. I think, if I'm honest, the sort of key message from Universities UK's perspective, and that we're hearing from our members, and I should perhaps just mention that for those of you that perhaps aren't as aware, or anyone sort of listening in on this, Universities UK is obviously the mission group for UK higher education sector, so we represent about 140 universities across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and so the key kind of issue that we are hearing on this issue from our members is that actually, you know, with the transition period coming to the end, and the EU settlement scheme sort of the EU settlement scheme approaching, you know, there remains a number of unanswered questions that we need sort of further clarity from the DfE and from the Home Office and from others. So I'll perhaps just you know, touch on those towards the end. But yeah, as mentioned, we're the membership body for UK higher education, and so we also have an international arm, Universities UK International, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, whose role is essentially to sort of represent UK universities acting, you know, and their interests acting globally. For a bit more background and information, I'm sure this won't be a sort of surprise to anyone, but you know, EU citizens play a crucial role across UK universities. That's both on the student front, which is perhaps what I'll focus on a bit more today, but obviously sort of from a staff perspective too. You know, coming up for 60% of staff at UK universities are EU nationals. So, you know, the contribution that EU citizens play to UK higher education in the UK higher education sector is you know, very hard to sort of dismiss, and is, you know, very, very significant. And as you can see there, you know, a third of all international students are from the EU, so they're a significant proportion of international students. I think there's often perhaps a narrative that, you know, international students tend to be from Asia or other parts of the world, but actually, you know, we do draw heavily from the EU, and that's something we want to continue to do, and want to continue to attract EU students, particularly obviously following, you know, the end of Brexit and the end of the transition, when we do have a change in the immigration system. But that's all just really for background and context. I think you know, as I said right at the start, the deadline for the EU settlement scheme is fast approaching, and I think this is the sort of the lay of the land and the situation as we see it. The 11 p.m. on the 31st of December deadline is final, and you know, the conversations that we have had in terms of, you know, being able to come to the UK to be eligible for the EU settlement scheme. The conversations we've had with the Home Office are that you know, there are no flexibilities or concessions that will be granted in terms of seeing that deadline extended. Obviously, if you arrive before that, you have until the 30th of June to apply. But in terms of seeing that deadline pushed back or extended, you know, we don't sense there's any real opportunity or possibility for that. Individuals obviously can apply from outside the UK, and that's something that we have been sort of trying to sort of talk to our members about, and make sure that they're communicating with students in terms of, obviously, if you have got individuals who have previously been in the UK, you know, they can apply from outside the UK to sort of try and make sure they're eligible. And one thing that we're also sort of keen to sort of, I guess, highlight in the conversations that we're having with our members and you know, with students, is that actually your pre-settled status doesn't lapse unless you've been outside the UK for 2 continuous years. So I think there's perhaps sometimes a misunderstanding that, you know, being outside the UK for a shorter period of time means that you know, your pre-settled status does lapse. There is obviously then a difference between your pre-settled status and then also your ability to get settled status after that, and that requires a continuity of residence. And obviously, if you have a absence of 6 to 12 months, that can mean your continuous residency does lapse. Now, one of the things that we have spoke to the Home Office about is that obviously students on Erasmus or kind of, you know, different study abroad programs will be outside of the UK for a longer period of time. So we do know that obviously studying is a sort of regarded as an important reason for sort of an individual to be outside the UK. So we're very pleased that obviously that is recognised as a concession from the Home Office, and that's permissible and allowable with regards to pre-settled status. But obviously that doesn't, you know, help those students who might have travelled at the start of the pandemic to sort of return to their home countries, who are now sort of, you know, residing there and haven't returned to the UK because of the sort of ongoing pandemic. And then another challenge is obviously that anyone that does end up breaking that continuous residency period, so that sort of 6 months or 12 months if it's outside an important reason, they will have to begin their continuous residence period or qualifying period for the EU settlement scheme and settled status from when they return. So the clock essentially starts ticking again when they return to the UK, and obviously after the 31st of December, you know, that time period, you know, you can no longer accumulate that time period, and so you'd have to qualify for leave in another capacity. So those are some of the, you know, the context, the lay of the land, the challenges. Perhaps just the final sort of comments and perspectives from the UK is that these are the sort of, you know, there are some very key questions that we are still waiting to sort of get clarity on, and that's the huge challenge that we face, given, you know, we are so close to the deadline now. And there's just 3 that I've sort of outlined on the screen there. I think perhaps first and foremost is actually, you know, what are the fee and status and financial support arrangements for those who are beginning courses, you know, in the next academic year from sort of, you know, 2021, 2022. who have pre-settled status or settled status in the UK. You know, that is still something that we're getting questions on. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misinformation actually out there across the sector. I think the sort of the information that we're getting from the Home Office from DfE on this is not clear, and is not hasn't, you know, there is a bit of a vacuum here of information, and the danger is that that vacuum gets filled with misinformation, and that's the problem I think across across Europe, not just in the UK, with, you know, sort of different individuals sort of speaking to different institutions, talking to agents, and that misinformation spreads. So I think you know, that second point is that when that decision has been made with regards to what this financial support arrangements and fee status will be for those, say, with pre-settled status, that information needs to be very quickly and clearly communicated, so that institutions are aware, that the student loan are aware, so that obviously students are aware, and like I say, sort of, you know, we are now talking a few weeks away before the end of the transition. So this is a sort of real critical, urgent issue that we have been speaking to sort of DfE on. And then finally, I touched on it before, but how will absences due to COVID-19 be treated for the purpose of settlement under the EU settlement scheme? We know that there are, you know, a significant number of students who haven't travelled to the UK this year. We are doing some work to sort of try and understand those figures a bit better. But, you know, students in their first year who've decided not to travel, students who may be in sort of subsequent years who've gone back at the start of the pandemic in, say, March time, who are now, you know, sort of 9 months or so away outside the UK. What is the situation for them? What's the sort of clarity? What's the guidance that we need to sort of be telling them about? You know, we don't want them to accidentally sort of renege or give up their option to remain in the UK on a much more basis if that's something that they are sort of interested in. So those are sort of the three kind of key things from I think UK's perspective that we have been talking to the government on. And obviously I think the final thing that I was just sort of keen to stress is that in the much longer term, you know, UK, our members are very, very keen to work with government to make sure that we do continue to attract EU students and EU staff to come to the UK and obviously make sure that we are sort of a leading destination for international talent. So I'll perhaps pause there, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I think you certainly touched on some of the points that Hilary raised right at the start about COVID and how at the moment there seems to be an intransigent position that says, well, it doesn't matter. You still have to come if you want to be eligible. The slight difficulty, I think, from a parliamentary timetable is that we are currently the 8th of December, and getting a parliamentary question in between now and Christmas might be difficult. I will explore with colleagues to see whether it's possible to see if there's some opportunity for a private notice question. So the Commons and the Lords have slightly different arrangements, and the Commons call them urgent questions. The Lords refer to them as private notice questions, and they go off to the Lord Speaker to be vetted. Usually it's because something has come up and is deemed to be topical, but I will see if there's a way of doing that, because clearly that there are going to be many people for whom it's a very serious issue. So I will take that up after we finish this call. But Hilary, Tiana, Jack, do you have any questions for Harry or comments that you'd like to raise? Further comments? Jack.
Yes, and thank you very much for that presentation. I guess I wanted to touch on a point that was made towards the end of the presentation about Universities UK wanting to work with the government to continue to attract EU students and staff. I guess it's half a comment, half a question, really. Just thinking about the impact that these kind of policies have on EU students and staff, and the kind of wider hostile environment that's being created by the Conservative government. thinking about the impact that's going to have on attracting students to come to the UK, and again, if no concessions are made on this issue, that again feeding into the wider hostile environment that already exists. I guess what do you think? Do you foresee that having an impact on attracting students? And do you think that it's a worthwhile trade-off for the government to make?
I mean, I think in terms of obviously sort of our ability to attract or continue to attract EU students, I think the points that I was perhaps sort of focusing on in terms of the urgency of getting those questions, that to me is sort of the main thing to focus on, because if we get that wrong, you know, there is a reputational damage that we'll see across the sector, because I think, you know, it is really important that we make sure that, you know, we've needed this perhaps information published far earlier to enable EU students to sort of make informed and sort of sensible decisions, really. And so kind of, you know, not having that information is a real challenge. I think in the longer term there are lots of ways that, you know, we can actually work with government to sort of attract EU students. I am sort of positive in terms of actually, you know, you've seen I think, reflecting on perhaps the last 6 months, the last 9 months working with the Home Office, actually they can be very flexible in responding to the needs of the sector. You saw that at the height of the pandemic with things like kind of extending leave, you know, with actual sort of exceptional assurance for individuals. So that there clearly is, I think, an ability for the Home Office to sort of support the sector where it needs to. And obviously there is a clear government target in terms of actually the international education strategy to sort of continue to grow the number of international students, whether that's, you know, EU, but also much broader. So I think it's the role of UK, you know, hopefully with NUS and others and other bodies, to actually hold the government's feet to their fire on that, really, and actually say, you know, you've got a commitment, so let's work together to sort of try and achieve it.
If I may jump in here, this isn't necessarily a question to Harry, but this is just a general comment that I want to make on reflection of the impact of COVID and actually the continued impact of what this is going to do for students. I think particularly for EU students that are coming here, what I'm also quite concerned about is that mental health impact. And if I'm being completely honest with you, the lack of communication has meant that the proper preparations that they needed to have made to properly come here, but not only get here, but settle here and find the right accommodation, find the right living and working conditions to be able to like survive here. And I say survive as a very bare minimum, because that shouldn't be what they come here to do. I think I'm quite concerned about that, given that the student accommodation sector is quite hard at the moment. The phases upon which students have been told to return based on their level of study, the type of student they are, is also going to be very confusing for them. And I am quite concerned that that's going to have a mental health impact that is going to be exacerbated by the visa issues, that's going to be exacerbated by the fact they're coming into an already foreign country, but they're facing just really, really difficult conditions that they, you know, this isn't something they can go to somebody that's come before them and ask for advice. It's a completely new environment. And I think what's overarching in what we've been talking about and what we've been, you know, what we will be saying to the Home Office actually this week is that we need to see compassion. And I think whilst I understand the you know, the urgency to do everything in time for the deadline period, I think you know, all of that to me, quite frankly, feels very political. And I think, as Jack said earlier, we need to think about this as a people issue. This is issues that are concerning people who will have a very human impact of this on them. And so if this isn't sorted out, it's not just a problem of visas alone, it's a problem of mental health, it's a problem of succeeding at their institutions, it's a problem of being able to access the education that, like I said before, they've dreamt of having. I mean, we you know, globally the UK talks about having a world-class education system, and I think when our international students feel unwelcomed here, that undermines any sort of thing that we say globally, because it shows that we are like, it shows a hostility that they do not deserve if we are trying to consistently tell them to come to the UK but aren't welcoming them with the same energy that we encourage them to come with. And I think that is hugely important as the overarching framing of all of this. There needs to be compassion, and there needs to be fast action now.
Thank you. Tiana.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the same point really that Hilary just made towards the end there, that there seems to be a kind of contradiction between, you know, wanting more international students to come and study here and then not facilitating that possibility. And like, just from our perspective, coming from Queen Mary, where I think we have like 60% of our student population are international students, and we're trying to get more, but at the same time, how can we're not supporting them, we're not facilitating them, and just kind of, in terms of like I don't know if concessions is the right word, but especially in this situation, I'm just a bit like shocked and concerned that a global pandemic isn't enough to like to have leniency towards the situations. Like, if that's not enough, then like what is to actually support these students that you're inviting to come? So I just think that's something that shouldn't be ignored, and it really should be a priority. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I can see lots of nodding. There does seem to be, as you said, there's something that's very strange about saying at one level we have to stop everything and deal with the COVID crisis, and at another level some things just mustn't change, and the trajectory we're on can't be altered at all. And my students have now, one of them started asking for, could I have a Brexit extension please for my essay? Now, obviously, I teach European politics, so he sort of gets away with asking for that. But there's a sense in which some things, if the government feels it needs to take a bit longer to negotiate, that's possible. And yet there isn't the same quid pro quo for ordinary individuals who are trying to sort out pre-settled status or settled status. And as you've all said, for students who are coming maybe for the first time to the UK, actually being able to prepare in advance, but you actually do need that opportunity and the time to be able to do that. But could I flip a question back, because we've obviously talked a lot about pre-settled status and settled status in the context of COVID, but to what extent are you getting concerns being raised by students who are already here, EU citizens, who are saying, we're not quite sure what we need to do, are the things that we need to change, and is there something that Parliament or government could be doing to help?
I'm happy to jump in. I'm happy to jump in first, but Tiana, Jack, please do jump in as well. And I say that because I'm now on a national level, so I'm not necessarily assigned to a particular institution now. So I feel that Jack and Tiana could probably give much more of that tangible real life. But it's been overwhelming, the amount of emails I've gotten from students that are just confused, students that of the characteristics that you've just described, that are just confused. They don't know if their parent settlement status covers them. They don't know if, their pre-settled status is enough. They don't know, they don't know if they need to reapply, that they are confused. And I think fundamentally that's a big issue, because that confusion is stopping them from making any of the necessary plans to be able to prepare for what's to come. And I think that's inhibiting their ability to also be able to fully engage with their education confidently, because I can speak for myself, and being a student only last year, graduated last year, even though it feels like a million years ago after this year. But knowing that I had something to plan for was always the thing that got me through my studies, knowing that I would have enough money to get through the term, knowing that I would be able to, find work for the appropriate amount of time, making sure that my accommodation contract was sorted, were all fundamental things that gave me the stability to get through my course. And I remember distinctly that confusion is where I felt stunted. Confusion is where I felt like I couldn't do anything, and I think that's been exacerbated greatly for those students, because it's just, let's just be honest, it's a confusing process, even like despite the comms campaign that has just started. Like it's not enough, and it's too little too late. Tiana, Jack, do you have any thing that you want to add to that? Just want to welcome you in.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the back of what you just said about accommodation and like finance and you know, making sure that you have enough funding to get through the term and finding work that fits around your studies and things. You know, I think it's really clear that being a student is hard enough most of the time, you know, for anybody, and then you throw in a pandemic and, you know, everything gets so much more difficult. And then you throw in the fact that, you know, immigration status is now being questioned, and whether or not you can remain or return in a country that you see as a home to you. You know, I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that would be. You know, we all struggle to cope with day-to-day life without the stresses of worrying about if we can remain in the UK or if we can return to the UK, and how that's going to affect us. And so yeah, you know, thinking again about the human cost of this, it's just, I can't even comprehend how difficult and stressful it must be for these students. And so I think, yeah, making any kind of concession for them or making it easier for them. I mean, I don't necessarily know the ins and outs of how the process works, applying for settled status and things, but it sounds incredibly complex and incredibly difficult. And our advice and counselling service, who provide immigration advice to students, you know, they've fed back to us about the amount of students that have contacted them and the state that these students have been in with the stress and the worry of it. It's, yeah.
Can I just jump in before Tiana perhaps jumps in? And I feel compelled to make this point that students asking for mitigations and asking for that compassion that I've been talking about in the extension isn't them necessarily being political. It's them trying to like ask for compassion. And I think when I've spoken to government ministers on it, it's like the response has given off a perception that it's students trying to block the Brexit process or trying to be political about their own views on Brexit. But like fundamentally, and I think this is an important point to make, they just want to have security. That's the bottom line. They just want to have security. It's not down to whether they agree with Brexit or not. It's about accessing the education that they value and have worked so hard for. I'm sorry, Tiana, I just felt compelled to say that.
No, that's fine. I think that's a really important point as well. I don't have too much to add. I think definitely the main thing is just confusion and stress from students, because there's just not been that much clarity, there's not been that much communication. And I think especially for students who have already been enrolled, but then I think Harry mentioned this as well, you know, March, the pandemic took over, so they went home and they haven't been back, which now then like affects their pre-settled status, or I get all these terminology mixed up, but like just for them where like, you know, they're maybe already 2-3 years into their degree, but then suddenly things are changing, they just don't know how to deal with it and like what's going on. So yeah, confusion and stress is the kind of main theme, which is really sad. And also like Jack mentioned our advice and counselling service, and of course they are doing the best they can with the advice, but at the end of the day there's not that much advice they can give when the government isn't being that clear or that fair, like so it's just a bit of a difficult situation.
Can I just perhaps jump in on that point, because I think it's an excellent point. I think it's come up in a lot of sort of the points so far as well, but I think the challenge is that, you know, we haven't had the clarity and guidance needed from the government yet, from sort of DfE, from the Home Office, and so those positions, you know, those people that are in positions of advice and influence, you know, within institutions who are advising international students, the NUS, you know, obviously kind of UKISA and other bodies that, you know, do a fantastic job across the sector. If we haven't got the information and the clarity we need, we can't do the job in terms of giving that reassurance to international students. And that's actually the, you know, the crux of the issue, is that, you know, we're still waiting on that sort of, you know, decision really. And so, you know, we can't give any further reassurance, and we can't give any guidance. And so we need the government to really own this in order to sort of avoid any, you know, we don't want any sort of discrepancy, and we need consistency across the sector so that all international students and all kind of EU students and those sort of with pre-settled status, those with settled status who are concerned, get absolutely crystal clear guidance and information so that they know exactly what position they're in. I think I mentioned it to Roger as well, but I'm really sorry that I have to jump off to another call at past. So
yes, I think I was going to hand over to Roger to wrap up, and then I think so. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to all of you. It's been an amazing session. We will share the recording with MPs, but I think what would be nice would be to share a one-page briefing wider afield, and you might just have a think about what the key message from your organisation would be to campaign groups, campaign organisations, consulates, embassies. The thing that standout point, I think for me, is that there's a lot of confusion, and that is upsetting people and upsetting their studies. But there are some things that could be clarified that could help to clear up some of the points where there's confusion, and what will remain are a number of issues that we need to return to next year. It seems to me the priority thing to do right now is to try to get a message out that is going to give some clarity through all available channels. So what I would like to suggest is that I prepare a one-page briefing off the back of this meeting, and perhaps we could include the slides or a one-pager from Hilary and your colleagues to go with that. And then we can get that out in the name of the APPG to all stakeholders and all available parties. So I'll follow up with you after this call, if I may. We need to have you back next year, that's clear. And just say thank you so much for helping us at short notice, and we will try to be as helpful as we can. So please have a think about what would be the most helpful message that we could put out to stakeholders now, and we'll get that into the briefing and put your organisation's names to that if we can, and start to disseminate that and get that job done. So there will be a practical and I hope helpful outcome from this meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to everybody for your insights and for